The 184th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been, there ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered by Vinny.
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. All the way to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony in person with you guys tonight as we hung out and watched Carolina dismantle Louisville 99-54 in the Smith Center. And buddy, let's go back to the preview podcast we recorded just last night. And I mentioned when we were getting to the part where we were predicting who was going to win the game that under Roy Williams, since he's been at Carolina, he's had the ability to get his team to play well in big time games when they need to get a win. And entering tonight's game, you're entering, right now you're looking at yourself as an 11 seed in the NCAA Tournament. This was not a must-win, but this was a big-time game for Carolina, and they delivered with their most complete performance easily of this season. And you probably got to go back to sometime during that 2018-2019 season when you had Kobe White, Cam Johnson, Luke Mason, those guys, to see Carolina play this well as they completely obliterated Louisville tonight in the Smith Center. So with that in mind, your initial reactions from a game that wasn't even as close as maybe the final score indicated.
Yeah, it was dominant. That was exactly what you were hoping you would see at some point this season for this Tar Heel team as they got later and later into the year. You just never really knew if you were actually going to get that team on the floor. That's the best offensive performance that we've seen from them in quite some time, especially going back to that team in 2018-19. In terms of complete performances, that is probably that's probably the best Carolina has looked at a game of that caliber in as long as I can remember. Probably going back to either the 2012 or 2009 teams, which, it's really saying something. That was a all-around complete performance that was dominant outside of a 6-minute stretch in the first half. They did everything that they needed to do to not only get the lead, but to pull away from a Louisville team that was outmatched in this game. Carolina, came in with a little more depth than they did because, they had some COVID issues. But guess what? It is what it is. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you in this year's ACC. Look, you of course wish the kids the best that are going through COVID and everything like that. Nobody's wishing that on anybody. But this is a conference that has seen Boston College play a game with 5 total scholarship players on the roster. This is what you have to deal with in this day and age. And look, they were missing 2 guys in the lineup, but they, came in a lot more fully staffed than I thought we we thought they would be coming
definitely,
into this
yes.
game from the rumors that we had heard. So Carolina did exactly what they had to do in this game. And even if you would have told me that they were without two of their scholarship guys, I don't think anybody saw a 45-point victory over Louisville coming in this game.
Yeah, the 45-point victory is the second largest under Roy Williams in the ACC.
Yeah, we remember
the first one still is that 51-point thrashing of NC State back in 2017. I don't think it mattered if Louisville was fully loaded tonight. I think Carolina may not have won by the same amount of margin. I think Carolina still would have won the ball game because they were more invested. And, I mean, look, COVID pauses, they matter. And Louisville hasn't – this first time they've played since February 1st, which
haven't even really practiced either.
Yeah.
This team was in zero rhythm at all.
Which is why – and I got a lot of flack for it. I stressed how important that win was the other night for Carolina just because they got to be on the court. They got to play, and they got to get themselves ready for what was going to be a big-time game. If Carolina doesn't play Wednesday night, they still maybe win tonight, but they don't look like they did in this game without having played on Wednesday. And the thing I love about this game is, look, you mentioned what Carolina did offensively. And, look, I love that too because you scored 99 points. They were getting up and down the court. They won this game with their effort on the defensive end. The 54 points, a season low for Louisville. You held them to 33% shooting. Only one made three-point basket tonight from the Louisville Cardinals. Now, granted, they're not some world-beating team from behind the three-point line, but that's Carolina's kryptonite. That's their Achilles heel. If you could say that they cannot defend.
Shut up. I'm going to cut you off right there.
They cannot defend the three-point line. They did that tonight, and it's the thing. And I mentioned this when we talked about the win over Northeastern. Their defense in that second half fueled their offense, and that was the same thing tonight because this group of kids and this team, whenever they buy into playing defense, first off, they're really good at it, and it makes the game so much easier for them on the offensive end, which is big because, as we've said all year long, you've got 7 guys that are freshmen in your rotation. So any way you can make the game easier for you, you know they need to do that, and they did it tonight with their defense.
I mean, this was the most active that we've seen them on the defensive end this year. Normally you're going to see some of those moments where there are some open shots on the outside because, somebody doesn't close out. There sometimes, you hedge a little bit and you end up having to scramble. We saw that a couple of times in this game, but there was never a time where a Louisville shooter had a wide open shot. And that is really saying something. And it shows that this team is starting to buy in. I go back to that game that we were supposed to play against Miami. When it gets canceled, we asked the question on that podcast, does this team become closer or does this separate this team? I think that a lot of people will look back at that game against Virginia and say, oh, well, if you just watch that game, you would say, okay, well, this team is separated. Clearly, this team's not in the right state of mind, everything like that. No, I don't think that's it. I think Virginia is just a really good basketball team, especially defensively, and it doesn't work for Carolina's young core going up against them and playing an experienced pack line defense that has been so tough even on veteran teams for Carolina. You've seen the last 2 games, primarily the last 3 halves of basketball that Carolina has played, why there is so much promise for this team going forward. And tonight was you put together that type of complete performance, and you look at the fact that 73 of the points that were scored in this game were scored by freshmen. It's your young guys that are coming to terms with what they are on the offensive end, and they're putting that to their best use. And I think, going forward, that can only bode well for this team, especially with the teams that you have ahead of you. But this win cannot be understated by anybody on the national stage. I don't care what anybody says. The net ranking is not going to care that Louisville was without 2 scholarship players. Won't reflect that. This is a quad 1 win. Huge for Carolina. Only their second of the year. And now you look at where do you feel confidence-wise with Carolina? Well, that team, that you play before you play Duke, Syracuse, didn't look all that great today in their game that they played against – who did they play today? Notre Dame.
Finished the game on a 40-12 run, though.
But still, you feel like that's a team that is not playing to the level where coming in you would feel like they're going to be a heavy favorite. You feel like now that you've beaten Louisville, a team that I think at full strength is probably a better basketball team than Syracuse. You're feeling pretty confident about where you're at. And basically, I mean, the thing that this did also is that this sort of widened your margin for error. This was a game that if you won, it helps you out. You're probably going to jump a seed line for the NCAA tournament. Who knows? You could potentially even switch spots with Louisville now. You could become a 9 seed like they were entering the night, and they could slip down into one of those last 4 teams in, where Carolina was at one point in this game, according to Joe Lunardi. So it's just, this is a humongous win for Carolina, and the biggest thing that it does is it continues to build momentum for you as you come down the stretch of the season. And I mean, now, if they can play anywhere near the way that they played tonight consistently going down the stretch of the season in the ACC tournament and then in the NCAA tournament, this is not going to be a team that other teams around the country are going to want to see on their schedule.
A big reason why they are going to be a team that nobody wants to see is because, and I hate to sound like a broken record, they have the best front court in college basketball. And I don't think at this point we can even argue that. And tonight, they simply bullied their way past a Louisville team, which since they entered the ACC has been one of the very few teams that can compete with Carolina on the boards, can match and outmatch their physicality. They've given Carolina fits in the 7 or 8 years that they've been in the Atlantic Coast Conference. That wasn't the case tonight, as Armando Bacot, Garrison Brooks, Day'Ron Sharpe especially, and Walker Kessler has simply dominated the post in tonight's game. All 4 guys in double figures scoring. Day'Ron Sharpe with a 21-point, 11-rebound performance off the bench in only 17 minutes, as he was the best player on the floor, not just for Carolina, but for either team involved in tonight's game. And tonight was just another reminder for all the Tar Heel fans out there that and I'm going to say, you'll want to bitch and complain about the way this team is playing, where they play with 2 perimeter or 2 bigs. They should play a smaller brand of basketball. No, they should not. They should play with 2 bigs. They should play inside out, because this is the result that you can get when they play at a high level, when they play with some toughness. The only thing that you can really complain about those guys is the 4 bigs combined to go 5 of 16 from the foul line. So Rollins will be happy with that, and those guys will be happy with that. But they have the ability not to just dominate games. They took tonight's game over, where there's the guys that were in the starting lineup, guys coming off the bench. You got to love what Kessler's given you. As I mentioned that in the post-game recap article I wrote on the HeelToughBlog.com. For the most part of the season, it was a trio of bigs. I think it's now a quartet. I think this guy, first off, has a role, and he's going to be a productive player for Carolina moving forward. Armando Bacot and Garrison Brooks, 2 guys that just were steady tonight in the starting lineup. Armando Bacot, 7 of 8 from the field to get his points. Garrison Brooks did a little bit of everything tonight for you as well. But I think that's the thing about this game, is that it reminds you that when Carolina plays at its core to its principles, they are a tough team to beat, and it makes the game so much easier on your young guards, and especially Kerwin Walton, who's able to give you 19 points and hit 5 threes because the defense is collapsing on your big men.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Kerwin coming into the game. I told you that I thought that he definitely had to play well down the stretch of the season along with your 2 point guard, combo guard, and R.J. Davis, whatever you'd like to call him. But, I think that this was a big game for Kerwin Walton. This is early on, he was your offense for a while there. He had the best performance of any of the guards on the night. 19 points. I mean, look, he's starting, he's knocking down most of these shots from the outside, which I love to see. But that mid-range game is